Hello and welcome to the Actual Magicians. Yes, I am an Actual Magicians bookshelf channel where today we're continuing with my top 100 series, and this is episode 6. We're going to be looking at decks 51 to 60. And in this section I'm going to be talking mainly about what I would consider art decks or artistic decks. These are decks that have a great deal of artistic intention, artistic presence to them. Now, every tarot deck is an art deck, of course, but this section, and again, I feel that it's unfair to call these decks 51 to 60. Whenever I'm using a deck, it's always my top one deck, so therefore each of these decks should be considered my favourite deck out of the top 100. So I'm only having to group them, particularly after we got to deck 50, I think, into general categories, because it's very difficult to choose a favourite deck. What does that even mean? Is it the most useful deck? If so, it's a deck that can be used for all sorts of different things. Some decks are very specifically good, I found, at least for one particular type of reading, one particular type of question, reading for oneself, reading at a corporate event, reading at a Halloween event. The range of decks is incredible, and that's a good thing, and the range of applications of the decks is also wide as well, which is equally a good thing. So we're going to start with the Tarot de Saint Croix. This is from Lisa de Saint Croix, who I've had the pleasure of meeting a couple of times and stayed with in Santa Fe for a while. And this deck is infused with the Santa Fe landscape and traditions, and it's just a rich, vibrant, colourful deck. The colours in this deck are incredible. As you can see, the book is based on the Sun card, and that's the cover as well. And this is the borderless edition, which I'd recommend because it really makes the colours pop out of the deck as well. So let's just take a quick look at this. If you want to pause the recording and take a look at the back of the deck there. There's a picture of Lisa in the corner there. Her house is equally wonderfully artistic, coloured, and the umbers and the oranges of the landscape really are present throughout the deck itself. So let's take a look at some of the cards. Again, this is very much a deck that could be used in a series called the Art of Place or the Tarot of Place, where the anima loci of the place, the spirit of the place, is really evident. I like the local traditions here in the trickster, the fool image. I love the shadow play here as well. The strength really does have that sort of Sphinx-like callback, and also a more equal relationship between the flower maiden and the animal usually depicted on the card. The deck's also notable for having one of the very early rose keys hidden inside it here on the death card. That's one of the very earliest rose keys from Arcadia to make their appearance in a deck. Real life Easter egg or mystery teaching in tarot. I love the fact that the moon here has the buried pillars, the drowned pillars under the water, the pearl of great price perhaps, going into the unconscious between the pillars of light and darkness, which are growing lotuses, which also well known for growing out of the mud. So out of depths comes beauty, symbolising the moon card. The Magician I love because it has a collection of all of the cards. It's very meta, very self-referential. Magician is on a wheel here as well. So I just love the deck. I love using it. It's a very real deck. We can imagine that this scene is actually happening. This is, I can't remember, I think it's called healer called a curanda with an aspen stick, if I recall correctly. And the knots on the aspen stick have eyes on them in the wood, which symbolise the ability to see all levels of the world. And there's the cave of initiation there behind the figure, the hermit. Again, this is just a really, really poppy, lovely, straightforward deck. It's got gorgeous artwork. It's very multi-traditional. There are Roman, Greek, there are personal, there are local legends and myths woven throughout it, but you don't have to understand all of those to really get the purpose of the images themselves. They're very universal, which is what I like about the deck itself, and some interesting takes on Waite-Smith imagery as well within the deck. So it's not slavishly following a Waite-Smith tradition, although obviously it is leading from that. And so this is the Tarot de Saint Croix. Some images on the side of the box there. This is the borderless version. It's one of those decks that I've actually got quite a few versions. This is an original print version that Lisa gave to us when we were staying there. So I've not even opened that since I brought it back. And the bordered version as well in this edition. So it's one that I've got several editions of. You can see the difference with the borders there. Perhaps they don't. I think the borders in this particular deck are quite good. They're reasonable. The colours don't take away from the cards too much. They don't take the eye away from the symbolism of the cards themselves. So the bordered version is definitely worth getting if that's the version that you want. But as I say, I also particularly like the unbordered deck. So this is position number 51, but also number 1, of course, as all of the decks are in the top 100. And this is the Tarot de Saint Croix by Lisa de Saint Croix. And for deck 52, we have the Ghetto Tarot by photojournalist Alice Smeet, who I've also had the pleasure of meeting and spending time with and getting to see how a proper photojournalist goes about their work. It's inspiring to see, and she has won at least one award for her photography around the world. The Ghetto Tarot was produced in Haiti, and it was produced with collaboration by a group called Artis Resistance. I think that's how one pronounces it. And they worked with Alice to actually produce a found object photographic deck that could be equally in the photograph deck section of this top 100, but also it's in the art section as well as all of the photographic decks that we've already covered could be. So again, the grouping of these videos is a little bit artificial when it comes to whereabouts they fall within the categories that I'm grouping them. Now, the naming of the Ghetto Tarot caused some discussion online at the time, particularly by people who didn't know Alice's previous work in Haiti. And so I think it has been released recently as the Tarot of Bohemian Secrets, which is a renaming of exactly the same deck. Now, I'm not going to go into any of the discussion about that because that's out of the range of this particular set of videos, which are just my favourite decks over the last 45 years. But I'll just read what Alice said about that while I hold up one of the cards as well. So Alice said, in Haiti, ghetto means a life in the slums. It means living without financial security. Yet ghetto also means community, family, solidarity, strength and rich creativity. The Haitians are claiming the word ghetto for their own. The word reached the island from overseas where it was associated with racism, poverty and exclusion. They liberate themselves of this unfortunate interpretation and are turning it into something beautiful. And so the name of the tarot was inspired by the Ghetto Biennial, which is an art exhibition that happens every 2 years. And this group of artists hold this and invite collaborators to come and create art with them. And this is what inspired Alice to do so as well. And I love the Sun card because of its connection. I'd never really seen it before, but as well as the Christian imagery that's implicit in the Waite-Smith deck, here we can see a retelling of the Christian imagery of the Jesus image that's actually the child on the white horse in the traditional Waite deck, although Waite plays that pretty coy. And here we have a more Superman type image. And the idea of the Superman figure, the red robe, the red cloak, is pretty incredible really to consider as a sort of saviour figure for the Sun card as well, because obviously Superman was based on saviour type mythology as well. So I just love the retelling of that and the simplicity of it and the wonder of including other artwork within the artwork itself, if that makes sense. And the whole deck again is an incredible deck. It's good fun to read with. The Death card. And the rule was that they would only use objects found in the vicinity, in the local area. So again, here we have the Ten of Cups. And I love the expression on this guy's face here. It's just wonderful. Really, really captures the Page of Cups. It's a very powerful deck to read from because the images are so evocative of the place, of the time, of the people. Again, we can see how it's a retelling of the Waite-Smith images. And again, when a good photographer is at work, you can really tell. Really tells a story with each card. And the minor arcana slightly renamed as machetes for the swords, brooms for the wands. We have and I just love some of the retelling here. I love the fragile nature of that card. So this is the Ghetto Tarot, also the Tarot of Bohemian Secrets by Alice Smeets, and it is number 52 in my list. I just realised that's a signed one. But it's just really powerful. It tells a story with each card, and this is what makes a good tarot deck, where you can apply each card, tell a story from each card into somebody else's life and transpose the meanings, the universal meanings that we all have as people, as human beings on the same planet with the same brain, interpreting the world through these universal symbols and experiences, whilst also having the uniqueness of one person's individual experience, whether it's the photographer, the artist, the designer, in this case the models in the deck, the collaborators with the design of the deck, then this is what really makes for a wonderful, wonderful tarot. So this is number 52, the Ghetto Tarot by Alice Smeets, renamed the Tarot of Bohemian Secrets. I should also point out that the Ghetto Tarot, the Tarot of Bohemian Secrets, Alice has more recently designed another deck called the Gift of Life Tarot. This is one that I've not had time to even open. It was quite recent over the last couple of years, and so I really can't talk much about this because I haven't used it. But again, it's based on photography, and it's a child-centric, a young person-centric deck talking about the gift of life itself. So do check that out if it's the sort of deck that might appeal to you and your particular reading style or artistic appreciation. Okay, so deck 53 is the Lowbrow Tarot. And this is an interesting one because it was curated by Anya Khan and Russell Moon, and it's a collaborative art project. So it's a majors only version, certainly this version of it is, and it was published by Schiffer Books. And say it's a major only deck, but it is a collaboration, and therefore it's a different art style on each deck. And the reason that this is one of my favourite decks in my top 100 and one I've used, and I've used this on the cover of a Tarosophist International magazine before, is because each of the cards in this deck, it's difficult with, let me just have a digression. A friend of mine, when we were mere snippets of lads, he bought the Fantasy Showcase Tarot, and unfortunately his parents threw it out because they didn't like him messing around with tarot. This is when we were quite young, and he always regretted the fact that he'd lost this deck, or it had been thrown away. I think he was at college when they threw it away. But this deck really appealed to him because, again, it was, I think it may be one of the first decks that used a collaborative method. So this has 85 different artists in it, this deck. So this is not the deck I'm showing for my top 100. This is a sideline, which we might cover this deck totally separately at some future point. Now, the problem with this deck is, and why it's not in my top favourites, is whilst it's unique and unusual, the cards are very, very different to each other in their style, in their, used reversals with this deck in the past, with their meaning, with their depth, with their symbology, and so forth. You can see how different, say, for example, the Hangman is with that Three of Swords design. After a slight editing or recording issue, at least, I'm back to mentioning the Fantasy Showcase Tarot, which I believe I just got to talk about the problems of having a deck that's got over 80 different artists in this case working on it, that it makes it difficult to join the cards together, and not in a way that is jarring, in a provoking sort of manner that provokes a really interesting reading. For example, the Silicon Dawn Tarot that I've mentioned before in this series, where that's very jarring and leads to very interesting readings. This just didn't work for me, but I think it was one of the first collaborative decks, for which obviously kudos to it for that. But the deck that we're talking about at the moment, the 53rd deck in my series, is the Lowbrow Tarot by Anya Khan. Let me just put that up properly for you. There we go, Lowbrow Tarot, published by Schiffer, as I mentioned. And with this, every single card, and as I was getting to the point of, every single card is a card that makes me wish this artist did an entire deck. And that's really good if virtually or all of the cards in this case, a major arcana deck, you just wish that each one was part of a deck, or you can imagine that each one is part of its own deck. It's got some internal consistency to itself as a card, and this deck is full of cards like that. So here we have the Magician, and again, whilst it's very different to this card in the style, they sort of set each other off in a very particular way that I find very useful for reading or doing self-work. I've done ritual work and dream work with this particular deck in the past. So that's the Magician. And again, we can see how different each card is. The Lovers there. And again, another problem with art decks and why it's interesting to look at them as a series or as a section, as a selection as we're doing here, is again, problematically, if one card just doesn't work for you, it can be very difficult to read with it in a live reading because you just don't get on with one card, or one card just gives you the ick factor or something like that. So it's far more difficult to do that when you've got lots of different artists in the deck or different types of collage. I love this Sun card. It's a Babylon and the Beast meets the Sun card from Hell. I just love the horse on that. It shows you what too much sun can do. This is almost like a reversed sun, I guess. Wheel of Fortune. I love the way they've taken the cherubim on this card and the Sphinx. And again, each card is so evocative in this that for me, it's a good deck for dream work, for ritual work, for other sorts of work. As I mentioned quite often with the photographic decks and the major arcana, they're good decks for using for personal self-development work, ritual work, path working, inner guide meditation. Just look at that Devil card. And I love the Blasted Tower from this as well, the sort of skeletal figure rising from the top. So again, finding a deck that just speaks to you is really, really important. Now this one does have a book with it as well. Again, because of my slight recording mishap, I'm not sure if I've covered this, but I'll just record it again just in case. So if you're watching this version, you'll know that I've already recorded this, but not been able to find it. So this is the book that comes with it, and this gives you a sort of artist's gallery of different images by each of the artists, so you can really see what sort of style and find out more about the artist if a particular card has taken your fancy, and they're beautifully laid out in the book. Just love the images, and each of these images would make a good sort of oracle deck in itself. You like the little figure there for Pearls of Wisdom. Make a good maybe Page of Pentacles or something. But again, if certain images don't really talk to you, then it can be difficult, again, with a collaborative deck. But the Lowbrow Tarot works for me, and it's a Majors Only version, the one from Schiffer, and that's number 53 in our sequence of tarot, and that's by Anya Khan, and selected as well with Russell J. Moon. And there's the book that goes with it from Schiffer. Okay, for deck number 54, we have a bit of a mystery deck, and like several of the decks in my top 100, this was produced by Adam McLean as part of a limited edition art collection series that he did. It's a Majors Only deck, and I really don't know much about the artist of this deck at all. I know that Adam has a good eye for art and for art decks, so a lot of his decks worked for me, and this deck is called the Diary of a Broken Soul. The Diary of a Broken Soul. Now, let me just put this back into order because of my mishap with the recording. I've already done this once, so this is my second attempt at this one. So this is the Diary of a Broken Soul, and again, it's a black and white deck. It's Majors Only, but already from the title card, we have this image that is just so evocative. It really does speak of a journey that we're going on with this deck. It is like a literal diary or a journal of a broken soul. And I like the idea that each card is a piece of artwork in itself, so has been given its title here. We start off with the Fool. Now look at the line work and the penmanship in the Fool. If I can call in a bit of detail maybe. I don't know how much detail the camera will pick up at this distance. But it is just gorgeous. Let's see if we can test the camera a bit. Okay, here. There we go. Well, certainly about there. So we can see the wonderful imagery here. I love the cat that's on this card, the freedom of the Fool, the bird, and this distant city reminds me of Tanalawn, the dreaming city in the Michael Moorcock Eternal Champion books, the eternal city of Tanalawn that appears and disappears in different places. And I used to have a Roger Dean, I think it was Roger Dean poster of Tanalawn, which really ages me, I guess, in my bedroom wall of the dreaming city of Tanalawn. And I love the bridge here as well, and the promise of further adventure. And I bet you've never seen a Hierophant card like this one. Again, the best thing about having lots of different decks is you come to realise that there's no such thing as the Hierophant card. All we have is lots and lots of different versions of people's versions of what the Hierophant card means as a strange attractor. Whatever the meaning is, we're never going to get in one picture, one word, one image. So we all approximate what that is going to be. And it tends towards particular meanings, the strange attractor point, but they never accurately reach that point. So the Hierophant may have religious overtones, teaching overtones, expertise, experience, being the interface, things to do with Pontus, the bridge, the keys, the triple crown, all of these sorts of things, but none of those are the Hierophant card. And if you have a card that you feel that you don't get on with as much as other cards that confuse you, perhaps it's because you haven't found the Hierophant card or the Hangman card. In my case, it always used to be for you. And so by having plenty of decks, you realise that there's no such thing as the Hierophant card. And what you're seeing is just an interface into that. It's the Emperor. And nicely enough, the Ash here, I think the name of the artist was Ash, or a part of the name was Ash, which used to be my magical name from the Hebrew Aleph and Shin when I was a younger magician. So I guess that speaks to me for that. And look at this world card as well. Just love the idea that our world is within the celestial or cosmic world. So it's not that the celestial and cosmic world is in our world is inside the other world. And I think that's a really important way of showing it, that this deck really does show beautifully and artistically. And so this is the Diary of a Broken Soul. Now, I know that it might be a bit galling to, if you like this deck, to find that it's out of print and very hard to get, or it might be very expensive if you do find a copy. But I guess what I'm trying to do with decks like this and this whole series is to see if you can find your own deck that you get passionate about, like I do about, say, this particular deck, and for the same reasons. You find a deck that's good for self-reading, or a deck that's good for clients, or a deck that's good for Halloween, or a deck that's good for the artwork alone, or for dream work, or for something like this. And that it inspires you, I guess, to go find your own Diary of a Broken Soul, and to actually, it doesn't have to be this deck, it could be a different deck for you, and that's what I would encourage you to do, to go and find that deck. So for me, that is deck 54, the Diary of a Broken Soul, published by Adam McLean by an artist called Ash, I think, and that's deck 54. And deck 55 is Bobby's Tarot. Now, I say Bobby's Tarot because this tarot is, as you can see, it's very plainly boxed. Very strangely boxed in the sense of the window doesn't necessarily match the image of a card that may appear in it. And it's just a straightforward boxing. But these decks are produced by an artist who I don't see many people talking about, or many people mentioning or doing blogs about or videos about or anything. But I'll put a link down below because he produces really, really nice work, well, at least for me. And again, the problem about this whole section, this whole video about talking about artistic decks, more so perhaps than some of the other sections that we've covered, like magical decks that we're going to cover in a future video, is that it's very subjective. So these are the decks that speak to me because they're mainly about the artwork, and that's a very subjective thing. So again, you might find different decks are going to work for you, particularly in the category of artistic decks. And it's a great thing that we all have very, very different tastes and styles. Now, Bobby just gets on with it in the sense of he produces a Kickstarter, he chooses a theme or selects a theme or tells us which theme he's going to do. And it's things like 1930s, 1950s science fiction cover pull apart, Russian architectural diagrams, propaganda art from the First World War, or something like this, Chinese poster art from the mid-50s or whatever. And he has a good eye for selecting the right artwork, particularly when you've got a vast amount of publications to choose from. It's a lot easier to some extent to choose the right artwork. If, like the Salvador Dali deck, you have a far more limited range of works to choose from, unless you've really got the images there that are going to fit the cards, sometimes one card can be a bit of a stretch, or two cards, and that can be the death of a deck for reading. If you've got a few cards in it that are just obviously shoehorned in, it's problematic. But these decks I love because he just gets on with it, he does the Kickstarter, and then a while later you get the deck in the post, and so far he's not had any problems delivering on the decks. But again, this deck and all of Bobby's decks and any artistic deck may or may not work for you. The Hanged Man, he's gone for a particular aspect of the Hanged Man that may or may not be the most prominent meaning or significance for you. Same with like the Death card here. Does that speak of death, or does that speak of something else for you? And again, with decks like this, it can be, again, problematic, but I like Bobby's decks because they work for me. And particularly the thematic ones, if I was doing a science fiction or a role-playing game evening or something like that, that was, say, Traveller or Gamma World or one of the many space things, Mothership, Aliens, whatever, then I might want to use this deck as part of the evening. So the Queen of Wands there. But you'll notice she's actually holding a sword. So for the more literal amongst readers, this is going to be a bit of a push to see that as a Queen of Wands and get the fiery nature of it and the individualism and so forth. And again, your mileage may vary with any particular deck, but I love all of Bobby's decks, and I just love the choice of artwork and things like that. The Page of Swords there is far more obvious, a Page of Swords, on the fact he's fighting, and we can see from the titling there, the Mad Robot. Six of Swords there, and so forth. And again, the artwork is always going to be, if you're choosing a historic theme, it's going to be tied to that era. So again, that may be something that you enjoy for the nostalgia value, or you may even find offensive based on the imagery of a particular time. So again, you always run the risk with a historically themed deck. And here we have the back of that deck, the two dueling spaceships, which I quite like, the simplicity of that. So that's Bobby's Tarot, and he has a range of themes. And again, I'll put a link to either a previous Kickstarter so that you can follow him if you enjoy this sort of style and want to see some of the other themes and decks that he's used. But deck 55, definitely one of Bobby's Tarot decks. Now, deck 56 may be a bit of a mystery to some, so let's see if we can guess who has designed this deck, whose artwork is in this deck. Because the box doesn't give anything away. And you can see someone with, it looks like esoteric knowledge here, perhaps. Perhaps if I showed you another image without showing you the name, if you were more familiar with maybe this artist's written work, or films, or plays, or poetry, you might guess from here that it is actually Clive Barker, well known for the Hellraiser series, the Hellbound Hearts, the short story it was based on, the Books of Blood. The Books of Blood was actually the series of short stories that got me back into horror. I'd not read horror for a long time, and then I read the Books of Blood when they came out, and it was just mind-blowing what he'd done with the horror genre. And I just loved particularly his earlier works, and I've read all of his later works, and mileage may vary, and I wish he'd get to finishing the Aberrat series, because the Aberrat series he did a lot of artwork for, and some of that is in this deck. Now, Aberrat, the series, I think there are 3 books out so far, and there's been a long hiatus in the story, but the Aberrat series does mention tarot, but not necessarily what we consider tarot. And I love the idea, I think it's in Aberrat, there is a bit of a segue into all of the diviners and the different mystics and fortune tellers arguing each other with the way that they do their divinations. And Clive Barker makes the point that if only they'd got to talk together and realised that all of their readings were predicting this apocalypse that was about to fall the world of Aberrat, that they were all seeing accurately in their visions and in their different ways of doing readings, then they would have perhaps been warned about it and been able to do something about it, but because they were too busy arguing over which way of divination was the correct one, then they didn't get to see that. And I think that's an interesting point. But again, like all of the art decks, this uses different pieces of artwork from different projects, I think. But because Clive Barker is as prolific an artist as he is an author, or certainly wasn't as an author, then there's a wide range of choices. Therefore, we get some really good fitting images. And some of these are from the novels, particularly Aberrat, and some are from other pieces of art. I love the Queen of Cups there. I like the fact that there's 2 different irises. I think this is a character in one of the stories. I can't recall offhand. The Sun. And again, because we've got so much artwork to choose from here, then we can get some really good fitting images. For some reason, I think this was in one of the Aberrat stories, and I just love this image. It's just so evocative somehow. And it reminds me that Pamela Colman Smith painted in a sense, a coherent dream world. That when you have an artist or a designer or an author who has a sense of a world that they have, and in Pamela Colman Smith's case, it was like the Hill of Heart's Desire, this sort of imaginary, fabled island or England that had all of these things going on in it, and each of the scenes in the tarot is taking place within that same world. but with dream logic. So they're non-temporal, they're non-spatial, they're acausal to each other. There's no connection, but like in dreams, like I have a marketplace in my dreams since I was about 12 that has a particular relationship to the same type of swimming pool that appears in my dreams, and that they're roughly close to each other, far more so than the school that is sometimes in my dreams and so forth. But these are all real places as far as dreams are concerned. They're all located with regard to each other in some unconscious manner, in some dreamlike manner. But there's a sense that they're all part of the same world. And Pamela did that with the Waite-Smith Tarot. And this is perhaps why it became such a template for all of the tarot decks to follow. And with Clive Barker, we have exactly the same thing. These are all obviously happening in the same head or in the same world. And that gives us a narrative consistency or coherency that is useful for reading or for guided meditation or for dream work, even for ritual and so forth. And I love watching these cards because they tend to do things when you watch them for a little bit. Messages come out of them. People say things. Animals do things. There's something else that comes out of the trees. You can read cards just by sitting and watching them, and then they'll speak to you. They'll speak to you through dream, through vision, through intuition, through messages that just come to your mind. Just love that card as well. In fact, again, like all of the art decks, I've chosen these because I love them, because the artwork speaks to me. And this is the case with all art decks. King of Swords. I think because I've already done this bit of the recording, that there was a blasted tower here that I wanted to show. Probably won't be able to find it now, of course. Oh, that was certainly one I wanted to show. The Seven of Swords. Again, this idea that there is a world within a world, which is what each of the cards is a portal to another world, the world inside of ourselves, the world of mystery and magic that is not just in this world, but permeates this world, that is seen through this world, and our world is actually within that world itself, as we saw in the Diary of a Broken Soul. Now, I just want to find the Tower card, which will probably be at the bottom. So I might just cut away and find you the Tarot card. So this is the Tarot. I keep saying this is the Tarot card. I mean the Tower card in this Clive Barker deck that I just really love. That really is a Tower card. You can tell that something's going on in the narrative here. The Devil card there. So that is the Clive Barker deck. I think I bought this on eBay or through a private sale on some other site. It's a bit damaged because I had to, it was sellotaped, I think. I had to tear it open. So I'm not sure if it's availability, but if you are a fan of Clive Barker in particular and the tarot reader, then this is the deck for you. So that's deck number 56, the Clive Barker Tarot. Not to be confused with the Aberratian Tarot, which only exists inside the books of Aberrat. Okay, for deck number 57 in our art series, we have the Tarot Revisioned by Lee J. Maclowski. And this is a majors only deck, and you'll see why in a moment. And if you have a look online for Lee J. Maclowski, you'll find, I think he's got public some of the pictures of inside his house, which is decorated entirely in artwork so that everything merges together, the chairs and the doors and the windows and the ceilings. It is all one piece of living artwork, which is just incredible. And there's a book with this as well, and it tells you how disastrous my archival area is at the moment, because I cannot find a book that's almost as big as the red book that I showed in a previous video. It's a massive book and I can't find it. I can't even trip over it at the moment. So I'll see if I can find that for tomorrow by the time I've done the editing, in which case I'll segue now. Otherwise, that means that I haven't yet found it for the time of this recording. So this is a Mages Only deck, and it is gorgeous. I'll start with the High Priestess. So again, look at the fine artwork, the line work of this deck. And on the back of each card, or each image, is, in this case, it's from a Gnosis text called the Thunder Perfect Mind, or Thunder Perfect Mind. I'm the union and the dissolution. I'm the abiding and I am the dissolving. I'm the one below and they come up to me. I'm the judgment and the acquittal. I am sinless and the root of sin derives from me. He's chosen that quote for this wonderful High Priestess card. But like we saw in the Clive deck and the Diary of a Broken Soul deck, and perhaps one of the images that we saw in the Lowbrow Tarot, these are excellent cards for just diving into, for meditating on, for sitting and just spending some time with. So here we have the Empress, because the layout of them is almost a tracing board in a Masonic temple, as a mandala, as a gateway to the imagination. These work wonderfully for that. So one could even have them in a temple working, where you were using the particular cards to go around. And we have obviously and because they're large format, again, because of the massive hands, you might not be able to tell just how big these are, but if I hold a pen up to them, you can see that they're well sized. So we have the Chariot there, the Emperor here. Hierophant. Again, there's a sort of Art Nouveau, Art Deco style to this, but they are wonderfully stylish, and the book is incredible as well. They're even bigger in the book, of course. So these are all, this is strength. Fine pieces of art. Wheel of Fortune. I'm reminded of the artwork of David Chime, who does some Kabbalah work, and I did have one of his books that I was showing a few days ago on the video shorts that we do. Let me just take a look in here, still to hand. Yeah, the Kabbalistic Mirror of Genesis, David Chime Smith, and his artwork is a similar, perhaps even more Kabbalistic and intricate style of fine line work. But again, this appeals to me, that sort of imagery that I can dive into, that it's a bit like a waterfall. I like sitting by waterfalls because it keeps my brain occupied with a lot of activity going on. That really does talk to me. So these cards talk to me. And so again, I would encourage you to find the deck that really speaks to you in that particular way, that really gets your mind active, that engages with it like a clutch system in a car, that you can put your mind into a certain sort of gear and then sort of through a cog system engage with the universe, and this provides the cog in which you then engage your brain at a particular level, and you can go up and down a gear with different decks as well. So for me, this is a deck that I use for really thinking about the tarot, when I want to be very active in my head about the tarot, I can use this and just spend a little while looking at one of the cards, letting my mind drift a little bit, seeing what thoughts come to mind immediately, or later on. Quite often they'll come in a dream or a strange coincidence, a synchronicity that happens, and that really activates the tarot in the real world, because we are inside the world of tarot, and the archetypes and the geomantic patterns of the world, not the other way around. We are in the world of the symbolism that arises from whatever the real world is and the patterns thereof, and that's why tarot decks actually engage us symbolically back with that original existing reality. So this is where we now, deck 57, the Tarot Revisioned by Lee J. McCloskey. And in position number 58, particularly in the sequence of 10 cards that are art decks, we have another in my sort of sub-series of decks I have bought from Adam McLean. And this is the Ithell Colquhoun, or Colquhoun, I can never pronounce it. Colquhoun, let's go for Taro. And this is his original publication of this deck, and there has been another one recently, and a couple of really good books written about Colquhoun's artwork, surrealist style, and her place in occultism as well. She studied a lot of Kabbalah, a lot of occultism, a lot of Croix, Golden Dawn material as well. I've actually got somewhere her original sketches for the Cube of Space, a very advanced, well, semi-advanced tarot meditation and layout, and that was popularized by Paul Foster Case. And I was lucky enough to get in auction her original notes on that. And some of her notes have been available for sale at different times, and they're very detailed. They show how much she did actually study. And Adam's version was limited to 100 copies. Mine's number 56. This was in his Art Tarot sets. And I think that's a previous address before he moved. And it's got a bit about Colquhoun in it, but again, there's been a lot more written about her more recently. She's been sort of rediscovered and then rediscovered again, I think. But if we were thinking about the artwork of the previous Tarot Revisioned, the Lee J. McCloskey deck or artwork, and then think about that in terms of one side of the tree of life, maybe Hod and the mind and logic and pattern and structure and detail, then here we shift entirely to the other side of the tree, entirely to the other side of the mind. If you ever wanted a deck where you have to rely entirely on your intuition, I know we've covered a few of those decks before, but this is the deck for you. This is the Spirit of Ether, and you can see now that you have very little to go on other than the colour and the shape, which is entirely symbolic. And she's gone for the Crowley Book of Thoth titles, which in turn take their name from the Golden Dawn titles. So in this deck, we have an entirely, this is a court card, the daughter of the reconcilers, the bringer forth of life. Sorry, that's not a court card, is it? That is the, is that temperance? Yeah, so that's temperance. Then we have the devil, the lord of the gates of matter, the child of the forces of time. You can sort of maybe see that that might be a devil images, certainly compared to the previous one of temperance. But this is a deck that relies entirely on intuition. It's good for provoking a bit of dream work. It's good for contemplation, maybe not meditation, but contemplation. And this deck is quite laminated. You can see outside, perhaps, if I can show you through the window there. That's the outside. But the deck is very, very laminated. So again, you have to perhaps read it by candlelight or something. But again, this is my favourite deck for very abstract readings, for really engaging the intuition, because you really have nothing else other than perhaps the titles to go with. I can't recall if the new version of the deck has the borders on or the titles. I'll have to go and dig it out at some point. Again, because it's only come out recently, it's not one I'm including in the series, because I'm only including decks that I've used over time. So again, if you really want an intuitive deck, you can imagine trying to read, let me choose 3 cards at random. And there are some hints in the colour coding at the very least, but not many. So if you had those 3 images, and again, this is where one's appreciation of art comes into play. If you're really not into surrealist art, then you might just decry these as just splodges of paint and little else. But that would be a 3-card reading using the Ithell Colquhoun deck. So the Lord of Swiftness, the 8 of Wands, the Lord of Earthy Power, will be the Emperor, and the Root of the Powers of Earth, so that's the Ace of Pentacles. But again, it's a little bit dangerous perhaps to, and Adam's cards don't have anything on the back of them. Might be a little bit tempting to then think about these in terms of the Thoth or the Golden Dawn or even their Waite-Smith equivalents. But I think I've sometimes am tempted to read like that if I've been given a brand new deck and told to read it for a demonstration or something like this. And there's always a danger that you go and reach for other things, but I always come back to the main rule. With tarot card readers, we read the cards. We read the tarot cards in front of us. That is our job. That is what we're being paid for or offering to do. And so therefore, read the card and not what you think is associated with the card, because you're perhaps resisting reading the card itself or think that you might not get anything out of it. Just try that with this card. It doesn't matter what it says on it, just have a look at the card and see what comes to mind. And imagine that you're in the oracular moment and you are just reading from that card. And the card will do the work for you. Don't worry about it, just let the card do the work. The card will tell you when you connect to listen to it, or feel it, or sense it, see it, that card has its own message. It really is telling you something. And that's a good practice. That's a good practice to do with all tarot decks, is to listen to them and to read the cards. That is all we are. We are only tarot card readers. So that is deck 58, the Tarot of Ithell Colquhoun, a surrealist painter and occultist as well. And that is deck 58. And deck 59 actually follows, I guess, to some extent, deck 58, the Ithell Colquhoun deck. This is the major arcana of Leonora Carrington, another female artist. So this is in position 59, and again, it's a major arcana only deck, and it's wonderful. This is a very wonderful production of it. Again, more writing has been done more recently on Leonora Carrington as well as Ithell Colquhoun. They've been rediscovered together. This was the Fulgar Press version, and the book, I'd forgotten, had been written by the late Rachel Pollack, very dearly missed Rachel Pollack. And so the book has a little bit of background. It also talks about the Marseille deck and about the 2 great traditions, of tarot. And again, one's appreciation of art is very subjective, as I mentioned several times in this video, so this may or may not speak to you. Notice this has actually got quite big borders because they're quite square paintings. But again, this is not artwork that has been chosen to fit the cards. This was artwork painted as tarot. Leonora Carrington actually painted these as for a tarot deck. Well, for the major arcana. So there's the Emperor, the Moon. I quite like the movement of Temperance. Again, skilled artists who understand movement, posture, perspective, colouring, and all of the other aspects of art can really do wonders with a tarot deck, even if they're, well, no matter what their understanding of tarot actually is. They have the advantage with the artistic side of it. And tarot is an art as well as a science. As we were talking about the fact there's no such thing as a Hierophant card or any other card, I think sometimes the Hierophant card in a deck shows us what the person thinks of as religion, what their attitude to religion is. Perhaps the Devil card does as well. This is another wonderful art deck. I haven't used this as much, but I do love the iconography of it, the emblematic nature of the artwork. I can see me using this for something, I just don't know what yet. But it's certainly already in position 59 of the top 100, and it may change that position over time once I get to use it a little bit more, I guess. But again, the numbering doesn't matter so much in our top 100, particularly when we're trying to compare cards that may be artistic cards, cards that we're going to look at perhaps in the next video for magical purposes, ritual purposes. Every card, every deck has a purpose, a use case, and so it's good to find what that may be for a particular deck. Just because a deck you can't use for readings doesn't mean you can't use it for ritual work or for magical work, for contemplation, meditation, for all sorts of purposes, even for the cover of something that you might be doing with the artist's permission, of course, or publisher's permission. But every card has a purpose, So where were we? That's the penultimate one, number 59, the major arcana of Leonora Carrington. And finally, number 60 in our top 100, as we're looking at these art decks, is a slight change of pace. This is the Fantod pack by Edward Gorey. Some people may already know the name or the artwork. This was first published in 1995, and as it says, it offers a bleak yet hilarious take on the classic tarot deck. And there are 20 cards in here, so let's take a look at these. And there's a reason why this is in my top 100 as a piece of art, is because art is meant to provoke, it's meant to have some sort of response. The worst sort of art, I think, I don't know if it's a general saying, I don't know who quoted it originally, it's the art that doesn't have any response. So this says it's the Fantod pack interpreted by Madame Groida Weird, and it has meanings inside the deck, inside the booklet. We can see here already the effigy has the meaning of August, also asexual problem, also amnesia, also yours, also abrasions, also an accident in a stadium. And I love the specific yet totally random nature of the meanings. Again, it's really good for doing party readings, this, which I've used it for before. So The artwork of the Fantod deck by Edward Gorey is interesting as the child. Now, don't you immediately love this? If you don't, then I understand. I do understand. I sympathise with your lack of taste, of course, but I do understand. I love the child. I love the fact it's on the skateboard. The bottle. Shall we try and find out what the bottle means in a reading? Should have put my glasses on for this, I guess. Stones, the effigy, the waltzing mouse, one of my favourite cards ever. The feather, the sea, the bundle, the bottle. Here we go, the bottle. So let me read out the meanings of the bottle here. So it can signify in a reading a decanter, melancholia, itching, unfortunate publicity, irregularity, a disregarded warning. More specifically, the bottle means an accident on a bicycle. I think you can see where we're going with this. A loss of feeling, flukes, vexation, intrigue, abandonment, and frustrated hopes. Now, frustrated hopes is probably the only thing I can actually see that makes sense, but that is probably there because it then counterpoints all of the others that don't. Why should the bottle mean an accident on a bicycle? And this is why a deck like this is good art, because it provokes an instant reaction of like, what the actual hell are we looking at here? What does it mean? As my son used to say, after a long explanation was given to him of something with all the consequences and the proper adulting, he'd just then go, but what does it mean? The yellow bird, which is obviously black and white, which makes it even funnier. Reminds me of I think it was Borges in the Book of Imaginary Beings, talks about the birds who only have one wing and can only fly clockwise around a particular hill where they nest. The yellow bird has that same idea of it being a total flight of the imagination. And again, one of my most favourite cards of all time is the Waltzing Mouse in the Fantod Tarot by Edward Gorey. The Waltzing Mouse. Surely this means something. Surely this has significance. Surely this isn't just the delusions of a rambling mind. It must have some divinatory meaning when it turns up in a reading. And it does. It really does. I like the fact as well that we have, again, in a black and white deck, the blue dog. Not the black dog, but the blue dog. And another favourite card. Again, because this is my top 100 and this is the art section of it, it's always going to have my favourite pieces of artwork or designs, and each of the decks will have a load of those in it, the Burning Head. And this is what I hope that this particular incursion into art decks in our top 100 has allowed us to do. It's for me to share some of the decks that get me sort of like confused, mystified, make me laugh, make me really icky, make me respond in some way or another, and use them for actual readings, whether it's a fun party deck or whether it's this is like for a grown-up party, of course not a children's party. And perhaps when at least a bottle of wine has been downed already, this is the sort of deck that is good at that sort of party, because everyone can then join in and have fun trying to interpret what the bottle next to the waltzing mouse actually means, what the burning head is saying when it's on top of a card that has something like that on it. And so every deck has its use, every deck has its place, and with art decks in particular, it's up to you, and I would encourage you, this is what this video has been about really, is encouraging you to consider how you respond to the artwork of a deck, to the intention of the artist, and to allow decks to have time to talk to you, for you to talk to them, and for you to find out what you're going to use them for, where they want to be, where the deck wants to be. And never dismiss a deck, or if you do, then that is perfectly fine. You don't have to like every piece of art. You don't have to like every comedian. You don't have to like every TV show. You don't have to like every tarot deck that everyone else raves about, and you think you're the only one in the world that just are looking at that deck and thinking it's like the Emperor's new clothes. You're the only one who can't see why everyone is going on about that deck. Perfectly fine. You find the deck for you, you find the decks for you, you find their purposes, their uses. They are the keys. You have to find the door, you have to take them there, and not every door is going to take you where you want. So I would leave us on that, I guess. A little bit of a ramble. And in our next video in this series, we're going to take a look at where we will be, position 61 to 70. And I think I'm going to take a look at Oracle decks, or Lenormand decks, magical classics, modern classics, or decks for magic. And I think the next one I'll probably do decks for magic. So I hope to join you with that one very soon in the next few weeks. Thanks a lot again, and as ever, the worker is hidden in the workshop.